So Chuck is the farmer at Freedom Food Farm. It's an 80-acre certified organic farm in Raynham, Mass. They focus on growing a sustainable, full diet on a year-round basis for their community. Chuck's been a farmer for over 22 years and has taught many workshops on organic, regenerative farming in the Northeast. And with that, I will hand it on over to Chuck.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming today, of course. And yeah, been I think certified organic almost the entire time I've been farming and worked on a organic certified organic farm before starting my own farm. So been, I've a lot of time to learn about everything on it. Just trying to figure out how to share here. All right, so got some slides of our farm and also want to give a brief overview of my farm as well, so that uh, everyone has an idea of this, what's happening on our farm and just an idea of the big picture. All right, so on farm fertility at Freedom Food Farm, it's cover crop, and that's like I like that shot of the kind of captures the farm center there. All right. So there's about 75 acres total. There's 40 acres or so are in pasture. And then we have another 3 acres in vegetable production. We have seven 30 by 96-foot greenhouses. And then we're growing about 5 acres of grain as well. And then there's some cover crops mixed in there that kind of rotates with the pasture and cropland. So it's probably about 40 or 50 acres that were agriculturally productive, I guess, to use that term. But I kind of do like looking at the farm as a whole organism, and there's land that we're not necessarily growing crops on, but it still contributes to the overall health and fertility of the farm. And I think those parts are really important. So definitely we'll highlight those later on. For livestock, we do mostly cows and sheep right now because the benefits you get from rotationally grazing. We raise just enough pigs to utilize our waste, so grain that doesn't isn't good enough for human consumption or good enough to donate, and vegetables that are not good enough to donate or sell go to the pigs, and we turn that into pork, capture that material, and also we get some manure from the pigs that can be part of our fertility. We do some value-added stuff. We do soups, broths, and veggie burgers. Our soil type is a Windsor loamy sand, so we're really sandy. So we do struggle with trying to keep organic matter and nutrients in the soil because it's so sandy. Also water. So a lot of the things we do that help with fertility are also helping us with water retention and just soil retention and soil temperature, which helps us with that sandy soil and making sure that crops have enough water and fertility. So our markets for moving our food is mostly farmers markets. We have two winter farmers markets we do and just one summer farmers market. We also do home delivery and wholesale, but the bulk is our farmers market. Those farmers markets that we do. The wholesale is not a huge operation. We have to run everything. It's 5 full-time farmers, and we also have 2 part-time people, and sometimes we'll get another 1 or 2 people part-time for the summer, college-age kids. And that's kind of fluctuated over the years too, depending on how easy it is to get labor. So we're currently entering our 12th season at this location, so we've had some time to build infrastructure and most importantly, build the soil and get some rotations and some systems that really work for managing all the acreage and knowing what fields are good for what and how we can try and maximize food production and also health production on the farm and the sequestration of carbon and the building of fertility in the soils for future generations. It's an old crew photo, but just got to throw in the idea of some of the people on the farm doing all the work. So the key is to soil health and on-farm fertility. I thought about it a little bit, and I think it comes down to crop diversity and rotations. That's very key. Making sure you're, not just rotating within vegetables, but rotating within non-vegetable plants. So pasture species, grain species, even livestock counts. Just trying to not grow the same type of crop over and over and have the same types of dealing with that crop over and over. That can kind of mess with your overall fertility and soil health. So composting has also been really key to us. And of course, the livestock is what mostly we're composting manure and bedding from the livestock. So that's a big part of our composting operation. But we also compost green chop that we harvest from the pastures when we have some extra. We compost all our, sometimes our vegetables if we can't feed it to pigs for whatever reason. All our prunings from the greenhouse, all the leaves coming off the greenhouse, tomatoes. We're trying to compost that. We're also trying to get in any like leaves or grass clippings sometimes from landscapers that we trust. Um, and so, yeah, trying to build that component of having that concentrated fertility is really key to it. Also, mulching, trying to keep all the fertility that you do have in the soil, and so it doesn't burn out and enter the atmosphere or get leached away and run off and run into the rivers and your waterways and whatnot. The mulching really, really helps with that. When you get a huge downpour, it protects the soil. There's really no bare soil in nature, and except for deserts, which are a result of not taking care of the soil for years. So yeah, always trying to keep your soil covered. And then rotational grazing, I'll get more into that as well, but that is a key to our fertility program because that allows us to really to build fertility on a larger scale. It's really difficult to build, fertility through compost because compost is such a small concentrated material, and we use it on our market garden and our greenhouses, which are small scale, but it's really difficult we wouldn't be able to grow 15 or 20 acres of vegetables using just our compost supply. Um, and so to have the rotational grazing on the bulk of our acreage here, and then being able to build fertility in those spots, and then just take a little bit of grass off of them and use that as fertility in our vegetables and greenhouses, that's been key as well. All right, so we're gonna go through a rotation of this is actually all pictures taken this morning in this rotation part here. Well, how we do a rotation and trying to keep the soil healthy and using, so basically this is year 1 right here. We've tilled the soil. It hasn't been tilled in 3 or 4 years in this case before we tilled it, and we're really kind of capitalizing all this soil that we've built over those years to grow this first year's crop of vegetables. In this case, we have some onions on there and some melons. And then we're growing this in a traditional way, chisel plowing and then disking it, spreading black plastic, and then we're mulching between it though. We make sure to use some sort of, living material or biological material for the mulch because we're adding to the soil there. I have used the black weed mats in between, and it does work well, but it's more plastics that you're buying, more plastics you're throwing out, potentially more plastics ending up in your soil. Those things aren't really known yet, so I always feel better using this, and it becomes fertility in the end. And also, this is another, this is keeping your soil covered and protected, and is creating habitat for soil microorganisms in between the mulch and the soil layer. So it's really a lot of benefits there. And if we do have to have the crop parts covered with plastic mulch, it's nice to have one part that is at least not covered with plastic mulch. um, Year 2 after we grow that crop, we harvest it, we pull out the black plastic, and then without tilling it again, we'll either plant garlic, as you see on the right there. I think that's going to be on your right side. And also, again, mulched with more leaves in this case. And on the left, there's wheat that we planted. Those are both planted in about September or October. And the wheat was planted with a no-till drill, which I can show later as well. I have a picture of that. But we're planting that with a no-till drill right into the beds after pulling the black plastic off. So, we've avoided tilling one more time. In the case of the wheat, we haven't added any more fertility. We've just seeded the cover crop in, and right now it's already up to my waist. It's the best crop of wheat I've ever seen. So there's still a lot of fertility in there in that soil. And then in the case of the garlic, we've gone through and spread one layer of compost onto the beds before planting into them. So that gives us like another boost since garlic is it's kind of a high feed crop, and you're harvesting it 9 months after planting it. So you really want to get a good amount of fertility in there, and it's a big cash crop for us. So we try to use our limited compost resources on things like that. So this would be year 2 of our rotation. No, sorry, I don't have pictured year 3 of the rotation, but basically it would go back into cover crops and pasture for the animals. So after we harvest that garlic in July, also the grain that gets harvested in July, we'd mow it down and we'd no-till drill in some summer cover crop, and then we would graze that probably or mow it and then plant in a winter cover crop. And so it would be in that cover crop grazing mix for 2 years. And that's the part where we're really building up the fertility before we can cash in on it later on. And last year was the first year I had one section of a field. I applied no compost, no fertilizer, nothing to our onions and melons, and we had some of the best onions and melons ever. So I think last year was kind of the first year we really built this area up enough that hopefully don't have to be adding fertility. Um, so yeah, it took 10 years to get there, but it's possible. I think it's easier too with heavier soils that have more holding capacity to them. So another example of a rotation, this was corn on the left for year 1. We, same thing, chisel plow it, disc it, plant our corn for grain. And then after we harvest the corn in the fall, we come back and we no-till drill triticale in. And this is on the right, that's triticale that we no-tilled in last year after last year's corn. And this is what it looked like this morning. So that's the second year. We'll harvest the triticale that year, plant a cover crop. And so the following year on the left there, we have our cover crop. We're building fertility again here. Sometimes we'll graze it, sometimes we won't. But we'll usually, this is overwintered cover crop, oats, peas, rye, um, it's Austrian winter peas, not fall peas, uh, oats, triticale, and also some wheat as well in there. Also, usually daikon radish we'll put in, but that usually will winter kill. And so this is what that looks like today, and that rotation of year 3. So this will either graze down and plant a summer cover crop as well. So then we'll have another flush of biomass growing. Some of those, again, we'll have some more nitrogen fixing crops in there. So we're adding nitrogen, adding biological material that can be broken down and turned into more fertility. And then the following year, after we built up all that layer of mulch as well with those cover crops, we're able to no-till drill in some wheat in the fall. And so then we're able to harvest some wheat the following year. And so, this is 4 years of rotation. We're harvesting food off of it 3 years. There's corn for 1 year, triticale for another year, and wheat for the 4th year. But we've only tilled it once. So we're kind of preserving our nutrients and not losing topsoil, and we're able to build that fertility up and keep it in the soil without losing it, or at least without losing too much. Another key to this has been compost. I really only have a couple pictures of compost, or maybe even one, because it's not the most glorious thing to look at if you're, well, actually, I'm sure there's some biologists that disagree, but it's really key. So we're using our bedding from our animals in there. Like I said, vegetable clippings, anything we can think of to get in there that's biological material. You have to make sure you're balancing nitrogen and carbon correctly, and not, if you have too much nitrogen, it will get really hot and you can probably have issues. And if you don't have enough nitrogen, then the compost doesn't get hot enough to kill all the pathogens and kill all the weed seeds and really get that biological activity going. And that's the most common problem, is that there's not enough nitrogen or there's too much rain. It's a difficult thing to do. And, I've been composting on and off for 20 years, but I feel like I'm really only the last year or two starting to understand how to do it well. And so it takes a lot of paying attention and seeing what happens and trying to do it different times a year with different materials. But in the end, it is really key. And also that's why there's some really good compost makers out there that people swear by, like Vermont Compost for potting soil and compost, and also Earth Care there in Rhode Island. They've dedicated 2 generations now to just learning how to build really good compost. So it is quite an art, but anybody can do it. And make something at least and start learning the process. And it is going to be fertilizer for your field. You just might have some weed seeds in it, or maybe you're spreading it without having as much biological activity as possible, but it's still going to help your soil. So I encourage everyone to do as much composting as they can on their operation. Close up to the compost, which, you see a lot of aggregates in there, and also you can see some mycelium and fungus in there, just doing their stuff, breaking things down. Cover crops is really key too, because you're getting all that biomass on top that hopefully is becoming more of a mulch layer if you're not tilling as much. But you have to remember underneath there's just as much activity going underneath. So you see a huge cover crop stand. Um, Pictures later, but a huge cover crop stand. Underneath that is the roots are about the same weight, and they're taking all that sunlight and turning into sugars and using some of the sugars to make more plant mass. But a lot of that sugars is going into the roots, and they're feeding the microbes down there and going into the roots. And once the cover crop gets turned over or turned into something else, all that root sugar becomes food for the microbes and just gets your fertility going and breaking down all the materials in your soil. One of the things too about on-farm fertility is, nitrogen. There's the biggest minerals that we talk about is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And nitrogen can be made with legumes through cover crops. Phosphorus and potassium, there's no plants that can fix those materials, but they are in abundance in rocks. And so in any soil, there's a lot of phosphorus and potassium that's stored in sand or little particles, soil particles, sand particles, silt particles. And if you have a lot of biological activity, then you can dissolve those particles. They don't have to be dissolved much, but just a little bit to get a little bit of nutrients out of them. Fungus is really good too about extracting minerals from rocks and things like that. So I think that's why it's important to have that soil health, because you can create enough, you also don't want to be drawing off a huge amount of fertility, but if you're not losing a lot of fertility through erosion or um, water runoff or things like that, then you can possibly create enough phosphorus and potassium or release enough to keep your crops growing. So yeah, cover.
Oh no. There you are. Chuck, you cut out there for a second. You want to reshare your screen?
There, yeah.
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 I had actually had a question. Do you know if um in that process, if you get your soil tested, that those minerals will come up, or
Yeah,
you just assume it's there?
yeah, definitely a good idea. Get your soil tested for a check for nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and also all the micronutrients too can create issues as well. That's where compost really comes in. Actually, I should have mentioned too with the composting that you the ideal temperature you want to get it at is about 130 degrees or more. And in fact, yeah, for the organic certification, you have to make sure you get 15 days of it being 130 degrees or more for it to qualify as compost. You can still, so as before I was talking about if you have some batches that don't turn into the most ideal compost, and so if you don't get it, you're not able to get it to that temperature. You can still apply it, but it's more like a raw manure um, product, and you have to wait either 90 days or 120 days, depending on whether the crop touches the ground or not. Um, but so, you can still use it, but just put it on a field that you're not going to be harvesting from for either 90 days or 120 days. And but yeah, if you do want to use it as a product that you're adding as side dressing, as a side dress to your fields, then you want, like, while the crop's still growing, then you want to make sure you have that 130 degrees. All right, so yeah, we incorporated this cover crop with pigs, which was always great, saves tractor. Um, there you go, tractor work. There's the no-till drill for anyone that wanted to see it. So we're able to just drive through the field and seed into the ground with that. We also do some cover crop rolling. A quick video. another great way to get mulch down in the soil, protect the soil, help in water infiltration, help keep with soil temperatures. You could also have seen people just roll it. You can just use a T-post. It has like kind of a sharp edge and put it sideways. And then I've seen people tie a handle on either side and kind of walk down the row and push the cover crop down. For makes it does the same thing as a cover crop roller on a smaller scale. So yeah, that's a really good way to build your soil and have some fertility there. This was Austrian winter peas and triticale, so thought, it's probably 5 feet tall or so, and you can get easily 100 pounds of nitrogen to the acre by, in the roots here for being fixed by those peas. Here is another cover crop rolling after we've rolled it and mulch, and yeah, using that as mulch to protect our fertility and also build fertility. More instances of this is actually in our rotation before we plant garlic. In that first rotation I showed, we plant this cover crop of oats and peas and then plant the garlic in between the oats and peas. I think it's too, anytime you kind of have living, growing green things in the soil, that's going to have that means sugars are being made and put into the soil to feed the microbes, and that's going to increase your microbe count. And that's really like the key to having the fertility and not having to buy it in, is getting those microbes going. I almost too like fertilizer can be it's good, especially if the soil, it's more something that soil needs when it's depleted or in trouble. And it can almost hurt if you have really good microbe activity and really good fertilizer and really good fertility in the soil already, because I feel like it kind of makes the microbes lazy and makes the roots of the soil, the plants, lazy, because they're able to just get their nutrients in solution and soil solution, and they don't have to bring sugars down at the roots and form that microbial community. And so the fertilizer works initially, but then once it's been washed away and it's gone, then you don't have that community of the soil community to support the plants and everything else. More gratuitous cover crop. That's like the summer cover crop mix that we grow. Sorghum Sudan, cowpeas, millet, sun hemp. Sometimes we put radish in there, buckwheat. Those are kind of like our staples. And then we're always rotating different things. And the more two species you can have, the better. The more biodiversity on the field, the better. So I encourage mixing with cover crops. Although there has been research that there's like a certain number where it's key. It's somewhere between like 4 and 7, and too many can cause a problem. Or, worst case scenario, some of them just don't thrive, some species. But it does seem to me you typically see like 4, 5, 6 species that are thriving, and if you planted a seventh, it's kind of nowhere to be seen. So. That's that same oats and peas after winter killed. So again, trying to cover that soil over the winter as much as possible. Mixing cover crops with cash crops, tomatoes, then we have that winter cover or the summer cover crop mix of sorghum Sudan and buckwheat, etc., seeded in between it. And that's going to creating soil microbial community there right next to our tomatoes. Hopefully the buckwheat's giving us a lot of pollinators, a lot of beneficials that are helping to keep pests away. And we've also mulched where the tomatoes are planted, and that's actually was put down as a green mulch. So we chopped it as green grass and then spread it on the field as green, on the beds as green. And that has a lot of nitrogen in it still. And so that nitrogen is able to like be pulled out of the soil by the plant roots and the fungal interactions with the plant roots. So yeah, healthy, building fertility here and using fertility here and shipping it off in the form of tomatoes, because you can't keep all the fertility on the farm because you have to make some money. So, when you're selling your tomatoes, that's fertility that you're removing from the farm. So you do have to figure out ways to replace that. But the idea is to limit it. This is what after 2 or 3 years of cover cropping and rotational grazing before plowing up and planting, we've built up, underneath here, that's the soil color that our soil normally is if it's constantly tilled. And back we were doing tillage every year and losing fertility every year doing that for a number of years, and that's how the surface of our soil always looked. And then when we gave it 2 to 3 years of rest of pasture and cover crops, and then went and plowed it. I still don't like plowing, but you know, you got to make money somehow and got to grow crops for people. People got to eat. Um, but this has all just been built into this black soil from roots dying and more cover crops being planted and building up soil, and those cover crops die and the roots break down and just turn into more and more organic matter. So it really does work. This is our fertility right there that we built up. We saved ourselves from having to buy it from a bag. Mulching is always key too. This is that summer cover crop just starting to emerge from that's a winter cover crop that we either mowed down or I think I grazed it. So it kind of when you graze that big cover crop too, it really mashes it down into the ground and forms a really nice mulch protection layer. Sorry, protecting that soil while this new crop is coming up. Um, so it's really important. You know, the saying that it's not our soil, it's really we're borrowing it from our children. So it's good to really remember that because we will not be remembered kindly if we don't leave uh, our soils in the kind of shape that they're needed to be to grow food. So if our kids can't grow food, they're going to be really upset with us, I guess is what I'm saying. Um, Here's another mulching in our greenhouse. We added a lot of leaves that we got from landscapers and also some just straw we had, I believe. And then we actually added chickens in there for a while, and that added some nitrogen to this carbon material and also mixed it up a lot. And we planted our tomatoes right into this. It was probably like 6 inches of leaves when we did that, and we had the best tomatoes and cucumbers ever. Um, so you know, not we do get some off-farm fertility in the form of like leaves and things like that. So leaves, I feel like are usually mostly pretty safe. Not too many people are spraying their trees. Grass clippings are a little more you know, you have to be a little more careful if you don't know what people are spraying on their grass clippings. Um, but yeah, it is important, I think, to replace some of that potassium and mostly potassium in these leaves coming in that you could be losing by shipping off your plants or by selling your products. Mulching, we mulched carrots too with straw. That really helped out. Um, Again, that same putting down green chop before we planted this crop and having some biodiversity in between your crops too. Um, so yeah, it is important to rotate your vegetables as well and to kind of have more. And this is a good like pest control situation where you're having a lot more airflow in between the tomatoes. You're not having to spray. Even you know there's limited amount of organic fungicides out there. Mostly copper is really only the one that works. So if you can avoid, if you're trying to be certified organic and trying to avoid spraying, I highly recommend having a lot of airflow like this between your crops because, like I said, the alternative is copper, which is a certified product, but it's a broad range biocide, you know, kill living things. And it's probably hurting your soil microbes for sure if it's dripping off your tomato plants and falling into the soil. Right. And yeah, finally, the last thing that we kind of use to build our fertility up is the rotational grazing with ruminants. And like I said, that really, you're able to build up some fertility. You know, so basically, it's difficult to build up fertility just by using plants and grazing and things like that. It takes years, even just to build up a little bit. And so, if you're trying to extract a little bit of that fertility from that larger area, then or to grow some vegetables, then you really need like a larger portion that you can attract a small amount of fertility off to feed that smaller vegetable production or high intensity crop production. So, um, you know, we're only taking off a little bit of mulch here and there, like maybe an acre or two or 3 acres for the entire season of mulch, and then taking that off of this rotational grazing areas and putting it on our vegetables. If we were to take, you know, if we were to cut all our fields every year for mulch and take that material off and bring it over to our vegetables and then not put anything back on our grazing fields, then we wouldn't really, we, slowly see our fertility decline. So, we're also, the animals are great for managing cover crops. Saves a lot of tractor passes and saves a lot of compaction, helps your soil if you don't have to do as many passes, with the mower. And also they're just by eating all that crop and leaving less residue, it means if you are going to plow or till, there's less residue to deal with, and so you don't have to till as much. Some more pictures of the cows eating cover crops. Oops, got the same one in there twice. So yeah, rotational grazing too. I know it's not, most people are used to as vegetables. It's not, there's certainly less people rotational grazing than growing vegetables. So some of it's a little foreign, but the big thing, the take home to to realize and to think about rotational grazing is that is a way to manage your grasslands to increase grass production. And by increasing your grass production, you're increasing photosynthesis. So you're having more green leaves that are photosynthesizing instead of, if you were to not graze a field, it would be really lush and green early on in the season, and then it would grow really tall and stemmy, get kind of brown, and then there would just be this brown seed heads covering the whole field, and not much light would be getting down into the understory, and there wouldn't be many, green plants in the understory because they weren't getting any grass. But if you're to manage that and have that, the large portions trampled down into the ground or eaten off, and kind of restarted, then you're able to restart that cycle of growing green grass that's photosynthesizing. And so you can do that multiple times in the same field in the same year, and you're getting more green grass, which means more photosynthesis. And of course, the photosynthesis is what's giving us sugars, which we can convert into beef by the cows directly eating the grass, or use those sugars to feed our microbes and create more fertility and break down the nutrients that are in the grass and feed it to other crops. So that's really the key, is trying to increase photosynthesis through management of grazing land. You can also do that through intense management of cover crops, just mowing cover crops and planting new cover crops and mowing them, but it's a lot more labor intensive and you don't get any beef out of it. So you just have to use diesel. So I like to use the animals. It's not to say we don't use the machines as well, but I think the animals are they're a better system. Once again, nature has figured out a better system than we have. Surprise, surprise. Um, Biodiversity too. So yeah, just briefly cultivating all these things and mixing them in a way that works and functions as a whole organism on your farm is like, that's the tricky part to balancing all these things and having time to do all of it. But in the end, I think the biggest measure of it is biodiversity. If you're doing a good job looking around and seeing how much biodiversity you have. Are you seeing more birds? If you're seeing more birds, there's probably more insects. If you're seeing more insects, there's probably more soil microorganisms. So it's a really good macro indicator of soil health and thus how much fertility you have on the farm. And also, this is going to keep you from having to apply fungicides or pesticides or apply fertilizers, if you're able to have a lot more beneficial insects, beneficial plants, beneficial soil health, beneficial microbes in the soil. There's just a few pictures of biodiversity on our farm. Snapping turtles, we're right on the river, so they're always coming out and laying eggs in the fields. Killdeer nests, if you can, it really takes a minute to look at it, but they're in there. We always try to stake them so we don't, or put a stake around them so we don't drive over them or till them or whatever. So I don't know what kind of bird that was, but that was in our log pile living there. I was out haying and there was a section of, I think, milkweed in there. And I just paid around it and said, we'll leave this little biodiversity area for the butterflies. They need to eat too. So just, I think the little things hopefully add up to make a big difference. I can deal without extra 2 or 3 bales of hay, and maybe we'll have a few extra butterflies helping things out. fungus growing in our soil. This is that same greenhouse after we had I said we'd put all the mulch in and then had the chickens in there and then planted tomatoes and had the best tomato crop. And we also had tons of different fungi and other slime molds and stuff like that growing up through the soil. And so I think that's a good indicator. Slime molds. That was thought somebody had thrown up in the greenhouse at first, but turns out it's slime mold. Chickens in the greenhouse, pigs in the forest. Pigs, I have to say though, we've gotten away from having a lot of pigs because we found that they're really like that. They're really high impact on the land. They do a number on it. So this was like a forest. We just once out of 10 years, we had them in this forest for a couple months. And we're, I wouldn't, if I were to do this, have pigs, a lot of pigs again, I wouldn't like put them back on this forest for a number of years because it took a number of years to kind of regenerate from this complete destruction. So if you have pigs, either try to move them around a lot. Um, Sheep grazing. Oh, a video, great. Cows. You can hear the birds too, and the insects buzzing by, flying by the camera there. It really shows you like how much life is on the farm. Oh, drag there. Pigs. We use them as tillage a little bit too when we can help save fertility. Pollinators trying to leave. Yeah, I think this one was unfortunately a short video, but there was just, millions and millions of bees on these, I think it's brassica flowers. And so sometimes we'll try to avoid like mowing brassicas after they've gone to flower for a little bit just to have some extra food for pollinators and bees. Yeah, I think all these things really add up to having, to supporting this functional ecosystem on your farm, that, supports an organic system. And that's kind of what organic means to me is having, um, creating a system using nature has all these things figured out, and we just have to figure out how to make them work for us and how to use nature's abundance to grow food for ourselves as well. And so, yeah, it's I think thinking about that farm as a whole farm organism is a big part of what organic is to me, and trying to make it all function together. Think that's about it for slides. I have a quote at the end to contemplate, but I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A, and talk about, answer people's questions or whatever they have about farming and trying to create your own fertility, and getting away from conventional things. Because obviously this didn't happen to us overnight. This farm was conventionally um, managed when we had taken over, at least for the last 20 years. It was a conventional vegetable farm for 10 years, and then it was a conventional beef and dairy farm for 10 years before we moved. And so a lot of it was just, bare soil plowed up, had been corn silage. And it took at least, 7 or 8 years to kind of convert it and rebuild up the fertility that we didn't have to, add in a little bit of off-farm fertility to like kind of alleviate that, helping that transition to building up fertility and building this whole living farm organism back into a healthy state. So yeah, here's Rudolf Steiner. The correct balance of woods, orchards, bushes, and meadows with their natural growth of fungi is so essential to good farming that your farm will really be more successful, even if this means a slight reduction in your tillable acreage. There's no true economy in using so much of your land that all of the things I've mentioned disappear. So with that, we have questions, comments.
Yeah, that's great, Chuck. Thank you so much. These pictures are really beautiful. Um, I'm like beaming with questions right now.
Sure.
So folks are starting to put some in the chat, which are really great. So why don't we let those roll in? And I will just start us off to talk a little bit about labor And inputs. I know that there's some people who have just started, for example, to like they've started taking their compost and making teas to spray it and like not even worry about spreading the compost just for the biological activity, with all the rotating and attention. I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to a little bit of like perhaps your organic systems plan and or how you kind of manage your team so that it's not like basically I think people are gonna be like, oh, it's too labor intensive. So what would you say in response?
Yeah, it definitely is labor intensive. And yeah, that can be definitely tricky. And that's probably one of the things we've struggled with the most is the amount of labor it takes to do everything in this matter because we've just moved, it's been for over hundreds of years. It's been, or at least the last 100, pretty heavily. How do we, mechanize everything and have less labor on the farm and grow more with less people? And really that's not possible to do well. It's to do it in a way that's not pulling fertility and not requiring a lot of inputs and diesel and things like that. It does require a lot of labor. So one of the things, like I said, I like to do is use the animals to help us a lot. They're kind of our labor, part of our labor force. So they're like, like as I said, managing cover crops for us. They're also managing all that land, not we don't have to go and mow the grass because they ate it. And so figuring out a way to incorporate them and use their labor to your advantage. And then yes, it does take a lot of work, and it's difficult in our economic system that we have right now to make this work. So yeah, I think that's a whole nother trying to make this work in our economy or what ways we can change this economy and our system, our whole societal system to encourage this type of farming and value it and make it something that more people want to do and more people are able to do financially. And also socially, most farmers are probably one of the most overworked groups, and so it's not good to be, working so much to make it happen either. It shouldn't have to be like that. So, um, yeah, it's difficult, I guess. But try to use things to your advantage. Also study nature, and nature has figured out a lot of efficient methods of things. And um, yeah, just anytime you can think about your steps too. It's like, do I really need to do this step? Can I just cut this out? Can I just tarp the field instead of rolling it first if I'm gonna use silage tarps to kill my cover crop and save the mowing of the cover crop or save the um, crimping of it or whatever. That might not work in every system, but just an example. There's um, things you can do. Also, with the no-till, it is kind of more as a lot of investment up front and labor, but over time, it saves you have less and less weeds, so that saves a lot of labor. I guess actually, and the other big thing too in that vein, that's probably the best example of this. But try not to fight nature. Like I feel like when I was trying to weed all the time, I was always cultivating, cultivating, cultivating. I was like just fighting nature, and like you're never gonna win. There's no way you're gonna beat nature. Um, and so when I was like, well, why don't I just instead of trying to kill these weeds 6, 7 times, driving over them with a tractor, I'll just mulch it because that's really what nature's trying to do is trying to cover the soil. So if I just cover the soil, then nature's not going to try to grow weeds to cover the soil for me. It's just saying, hey, you forgot to cover this. I'll do it for you. But yeah, just try not to fight nature if you can avoid it. Also, yeah, talking about you mentioned the organic systems plan. That is a really good document to try to incorporate all these things. So it really does make you think about like how am I going to control my pests and all of this? Like where is my fertility going to come from to grow this crop? It makes you document your rotations. Like, am I rotating um, this field out of vegetables enough, or like am I growing brassicas there too much? I feel like, yeah, one of the biggest benefits I've had to being certified organic is like it holds you accountable to like keeping those records. Because a lot of times, like, oh, I'll remember that, and then I don't, and I'm like, oh, I'll go check my field map or whatever, and it says on there, what I planted and when I planted it and everything, what fertilizer I put on there too. So I said, oh, I went heavy on the compost that field a couple of years ago, so it's probably good for another year or something. But yeah, that is really good to be made to keep all those records.
That's great. Thanks. I'm going to do a little, we have lots of questions rolling in, so I'm going to do kind of a combo of one. This is a little bit more about your grazing and managing some of your animals. So someone's wondering if you use the sequential animal rotation, similar to the system that Joe Saladin uses, the cows, chickens, pigs, and sequence. And then someone is also wondering, in addition to that, if you've experienced or worried about compaction with the cows going through and eating
Okay.
grass and things.
Yes. So for the animal rotation, we have kind of two groups of ruminants going right now. And so we have sheep and cows in one group, and then we're following them with chickens. And so part of that is that the chickens need fencing, and it kind of saves us another way to save labor, where we have one fence and we're rotating two sets of animals through it. So we don't have to set up two sets of fence. We just set up one and move them through. So that's labor savings. The chickens are reducing parasite load for the sheep. So that's part of how we're handling parasite. So since, we don't use any dewormers, there's really limited organic dewormers. I mean, I really only think I don't know of any products like Omri listed. We use like organic pumpkin seeds, or we also give them kelp and salt, free choice, and that's supposed to help with parasites and also breeding. But the chickens is another component of that, and so that's like also how we keep parasites out of our sheep flock because they're notoriously susceptible to parasites. We don't the pigs. We try to keep them out of our pastures because they just really root them up. Potentially we could try to get some like pasture pigs or different genetics that don't root as much, but just haven't gotten to that point yet. And we try to use them either have them in an area that they're just going to be in for 1 year, not go, or one season and not be there again for a number of years. Or if there's like a field that we want to till up for vegetables or grain production, then we'll use them to like till it up and just move them every few days you have to have the right size paddock and then and the right window of time in there, but they can root up pretty much an entire area in a few days. Um, so yeah, that's kind of our sequence. And then we have another group that's just cows, and we don't follow them with any other animals. And that's again, it's another fencing thing because those cows are in a different type of fencing that's they're in like a single strand or sometimes three strand fencing that's a lot easier to move than the sheep and chicken fencing that we have. And so they kind of graze on land where it's more difficult to set up the sheep and chicken fencing. So yeah, just those factor into it. And I do like the idea of stacking though. You're getting two products out, off the same field, like having the chickens follow the sheep. Um, but you do have to worry about, you don't want to like chickens can really do a number on land. So you don't want to have like, be careful having too many, like overgraze it with sheep or graze it a lot with sheep and then bring on a whole bunch of chickens like that can be too much. Like we have 30 chickens and the paddock's 2/3 of an acre and we're moving it every 3 days. So it's really not a huge impact with chickens. Um, yeah, the other question too, talking about compaction with cows going through. I don't see compaction really with the cows, and there's a lot. We also have the lighter soils, so that helps. But there's a lot to be said. I think like the cow hooves are actually like aerating and mixing the soil a little bit and probably potentially even alleviating compaction because they're like getting air in like down further into the soil where it wouldn't be normally. And so as long as you're not overgrazing, you shouldn't have compaction issues. But that's really like you don't want to have animals on one piece of land for longer than 3 days. That's pretty much the max before you start overgrazing. So as long as you're doing that and you don't have too many in a paddock, you shouldn't get compaction issues. Staff live on site. We don't unfortunately have staff living on site. That would be great. But yeah, that's a major problem, and especially in Massachusetts is the housing issue. And that's we've lost a lot of farmers because we don't good farmers that farmed here and couldn't get afford housing in the area, or didn't have housing in the area, didn't got tired of commuting from Providence or whatever. So it's a big issue. Rolling through here. Um, so keeping plants in the same space they grew last year. To cater to that plant. So yeah, I don't have any. I just have kind of anecdotal stuff, and I've definitely heard that before, like trying to build the soil so that it grows a certain thing well. Um, and I think there is something to be said about, like, we definitely have greenhouses that we built it up and they grow vegetables really well. I would be wary of growing the same annual year after year. So like if you have brassicas, you probably don't want to be growing the same annual brassicas year after year because you'll inevitably you build up things like club root and other soil-borne diseases. And that's nature telling you that, look, we've had enough brassicas. The nutrients that brassicas pull from the soil and or the functions that brassicas um like their function in the soil has been filled. Like whatever it is brassicas were doing and helping the soil, that's been fixed now and alleviated. And now it's time to get rid of the brassicas. That's what like club root to me, or like a soil-borne pathogen, is telling me. So I think as long as you're not seeing disease issues, then could be fine. But if you see disease issues, that's kind of nature saying it's time to rotate or grow something else. So, and also the other aspect part of that is growing perennials in the same place year after year, which I think that's huge to building soil is yeah, having like the same crop that's in there and not being disturbed and not getting like replanted for a long window of time. But even like perennials like alfalfa or like grasses, like after time, they do go through a phase and they kind of start to die out and let because they're kind of it's time that means it's time to like let another species come in. So it's just like a longer cycle. Um, so what sorts of cover crops would be best for rotational grazing with cover crops? So the ones I like to graze for overwintered, triticale is really good, does well for us, and Austrian winter peas. It's going to vary with your soil type in your farm, but so you'll probably have to experiment with things. But that's what's worked really well with us for overwintered crops to graze. And then summer cover crops, that sorghum sudan, sun hemp, and the cowpeas and the millet, that those four there, the animals really seem to love and go nuts for, and we get a lot of production off of it. And also in a drought year, it can really save us because that stuff will grow even with barely any rain, as long as you can seed it, as long as there's some water and rain to get it germinated, like during seeding, it can tolerate a lot of drought later on in the season. And it's been, saved our butt a few times of having enough forage in the summer. So I really recommend those. So a mention of books by Woody Lane on the rotation. Is that the one, Doug? Feeding cover crops
Oh,
through.
I yep, lots on cover crop rotation and grazing and management.
Right on. Okay, yeah,
Woody Lane, PhD. The
all right.
first one is called Capturing Sunlight, and then the second book is I think it's called From the Barn, from the Trough or something. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Are there any more questions? Oh yeah, go ahead, Laura.
I had a quick one. So sometimes Chuck, farmers will take a soil test at the end of the year and they'll decide what, inputs to buy based upon their soil test. But you're using mostly on-farm fertility. So do you just look at your organic matter and decide, yeah, I've got plenty of nitrogen, or how do you normally calculate anything else you might need?
So we do soil tests. We try, there's 70 acres and soil tests are getting more and more expensive. So we usually, I mean, ideally I would be taking, you know, a bunch every year, but it's down to maybe every couple years I'll test a few fields. Um, it is good to see those benchmarks and see, you know, are you getting lower micronutrients, like how much nitrates in there right now. Also, like I like the ones from Woods End, I believe Woods End Laboratories. They have like they look at some other factors too. It's nice to get like a biological assessment too of how much biology is happening in there. pH too, that's another big one that can kind of creep up and you know have cause issues. So it's always good to get a baseline here and there. But a lot of it is crop health. You know, just looking at you know, looking at the obviously you'll see when you plant your cash crop how what your fertility is by how well the crop grows. That's like really the for me like the ultimate measure. Because if soil tests, you know, say everything good, but the crop doesn't look good, um, then still you know you have the same problem. You know, you still have a problem. And it can go vice versa too. So you can say, you know, soil test might not say great, but then for whatever reason the crop comes in pretty decent. So that's for us, that's what we use, but also like you kind of want to know before you plant the crop if you're going to have enough fertility. So we're always keeping an eye on like the cover crops that we're planting there and the pasture species and just like looking at that soil health, even digging up the soil too, like looking what the soil looks um, like compacted soil that can be, you know, it gets compacted by tractors and stuff, but if you have a lot of good biology in there, then that compaction is slowly getting eased by like earthworm activity and things like that. And so like compaction can be, um, you know, like an indicator that you have poor fertility. And just looking at how the soil feels, how it looks, how the plants look. Yeah.
Chuck, does that go for biological activity too? Like, do you use anything to test your microbes, or is that more of a sensing thing for you?
Just that Woods End one, I feel like they have a couple counts on there. But yeah, and mostly it's yeah, looking at crop health and also yeah, just doing the rotations and having, I guess, some faith. Yeah, I probably should be more you do some more testing. But I've yeah, it seems like the quality of our crops and like the fertility has been going up. So as it's kind of been inverse to the amount of testing I've done. As I've seen like things look better, I've just been doing less testing. It's basically how it's been going.
Great. And he's also wondering, do you have to worry about invasive bugs when bringing in leaves?
We haven't had any trouble yet, but yeah, who knows? I've heard that there's like the jumping worm. I think I saw some of those in the last batch of leaves. I don't know. I think I do put a lot of faith in just nature, hopefully figuring it out. And um, you know, we also we're getting the leaves are, you know, they're getting dumped by the load. So, you know, there could be 1 out of 30 load. If there is like a lot of bugs in one load, hopefully it's only 1 out of 30, and we're not, you know, it's going to get spread around a little bit. But we haven't had any issues yet, knock on wood, or at least any issues that were caused by that I knew they were caused by that.
Great.
Well, good edible cover crops. Yeah, wheat. That wheat in one of our rotation, you know, it is a cover crop for the fall for us, and also like this time of year, you know, basically it's acting as a cover crop, but then we'll harvest that in July. Wheat, triticale are good ones. Probably the two easiest ones. Oats. Peas actually, yeah, peas are really good for pea shoots.
Great. So this is, oh, Laura, you want to talk a little bit about what you just put in the chat?
Yeah, the Transition to Organic Partnership program, people that might be interested in transitioning to organic and also get some help with their organic system plan can apply for a mentorship at that link. And we're now in our third year now of the program. We're going to go through September 2026. We had positive review and approval from the USDA, which I'm happy to report. And so we are moving forward. So far, we've certified another 15 farms in Massachusetts over the last couple of years. So we're really excited to have you here. And thanks for USDA top support for this webinar.